Director for Pittsburgh's Gender Equity Commission in the Mayor's Office. I am very happy to see many of you here today, and I will read from some prepared statements, and I want to thank Jackie Smith very much for all of her hard work in making this event happen and for keeping us all aware of human rights on the local level. I'm going to simply read off the list of speakers after I give my introductory comments, and then I will ask each of them to come up in turn once the previous speaker has concluded. Thank you so much. In 2019 to 2020, the United States is undergoing a comprehensive human rights assessment through the United Nations Universal Periodic Review process. As part of this process, groups in Pittsburgh have been coming together. They've been collecting information and compiling their own human rights assessment, which will be filed with the United Nations later this week. People in Pittsburgh are working with people in many, many other cities, both nationally and internationally. In the US, these cities include Washington, D.C., Chicago, New Orleans, Jackson, Mississippi, Grand Rapids, Michigan, as part of the Human Rights Cities Alliance, UPR Cities Project. We're not just cataloging abuses, but we're focused on making recommendations for national as well as state and local government actions to improve human rights in our communities. We plan to use the information gathered for this report to advocate for changes in policies and practices that will make our communities places where everyone can enjoy their full range of human rights and dignity. Pittsburgh's report to the United Nations focuses on the theme of racial disparities as a core obstacle to improving human rights in our region. It links racial inequities and discriminations to the limits of human rights to housing, health and well-being, fair treatment, and due process in regard to policing and criminal punishment. Through Pittsburgh's work with other cities, people are learning about the common challenges that we face and possible solutions that can be in forming urban policy so that we can both be doing the work here on the ground and also supporting the work throughout the nation. The Pittsburgh groups plan to bring these ideas into local conversations and plannings, and some of you may have attended forums, as I did, some of the best conversations I've seen across sectors and different groups about how we can work together to make this a city livable for all. The UPR report will not just inform the work of the UN in Geneva, but local residents will use it to shape ongoing consultations about human rights conditions in Pittsburgh as we try to find better ways to bring local realities more in line with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. As folks in the campaign have said, it's up to local communities to help translate international laws and bring human rights home. And I'm very glad that you're here to stand behind a statement like that. Following me will be Megan Stanley, who is the director of the City of Pittsburgh Commission on Human Relations, who also has been integral in bringing this all together today. Erica Strasburger, Council Member Erica Strasburger from the City Council for the City of Pittsburgh. Celeste Scott and Aletha Sims, Celeste Scott from Pittsburgh United and Aletha Sims from CORE. Gerald Dickinson, Professor of Law at the University of Pittsburgh. Laura Weems, who is the Executive Director for Pittsburghers for Public Transit. And Lindsay Williams, Assistant Chief of Staff for the Office of the Mayor. Once again, thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from these impressive speakers.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. Earlier this morning at the City Council meeting, Councilperson Strasburger sponsored a proclamation marking today, October 1st, 2019, as Zero Evictions Day in the City of Pittsburgh. And in 2 days, as you heard, we will submit jointly a report on the state of human rights in the City of Pittsburgh for the UN to review. Proclaiming a Zero Evictions Day in the City of Pittsburgh is one small step for the city to uphold its dedication to human rights. In 2011, Pittsburgh proclaimed itself a human rights city and promised to promote and protect human rights for all people within its borders. I want to be very clear today. Fair housing is a human right. Access to fair housing contributes to a standard of adequate living. Pittsburgh's residential renters need housing that is affordable, is safe and accessible to all vital resources. Yet today, Pittsburgh is failing to protect its citizens' right to fair housing. There's a need gap of nearly 20,000 affordable units, which disproportionately affects women, single parents, and communities of color. A recent fair housing assessment chartered by the Pittsburgh Commission on Human Relations and done by the University of Pittsburgh corroborates the disparate impact of housing inequality. Pittsburgh residents reported to us difficulty staying in affordable homes due to the instability of housing choice vouchers in the city, the lack of affordable units, the poor living conditions in affordable units. The only units that they are able to get into have horrible health violations that are not being monitored closely, as well as rapidly rising costs of housing in previously affordable neighborhoods, lack of access to resources and unsafe environments. Residents noted that systemic bias plays a large role in their struggle to find and keep housing. Across our city, citizens of Pittsburgh feel treated differently and unfairly in housing because of their race, their familial status, their gender, disability, source of income, credit history, and criminal background. These last few issues are currently not covered in city code, but we continue to fight legal challenges to add such protections for Pittsburghers. Another issue raised is the ongoing trade-off between affordable housing and living in safe communities with access to transit, to employment, to healthy food, and to good medical care. Such areas of opportunity should be available to all people, not only those who can afford it in the city of Pittsburgh. Starting next month, we will be holding community-based meetings with residents, advocates, housing providers, and housing professionals to better inform our data visualization project around fair housing with the CMU Create Lab. We invite all of you to attend and to give feedback on the housing issues that impact your everyday lives and those around you, so we can create a tool that is accessible and useful for everyone, not just a report that will sit on a shelf. As always, if you or anyone you know feels they've been unfairly denied housing or subjected to different housing terms, please contact the Commission on Human Relations to see if we can help. Viewing housing as a human right guaranteed to us all requires new programs and efforts to ensure that residents live in places where they can pursue gainful employment, live without fear or threat of violence, be around those that they know and love, and rely on stable and affordable rent. Pittsburgh must do better for its citizens and fulfill its promise to protect human rights. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank Megan Stanley for the work that she's done to bring this to our attention and to organize this press conference, and also to those speakers here today and those not here today who are working on this issue day in and day out and truly in the trenches. To the activists, advocates, and academics who work on this, I really thank you. Megan Stanley said a lot of what I wanted to cover. That it's not just about it being a human right, because it is. But let's break that down a little bit. What does it actually mean? What kind of a vicious cycle do we get into when someone is evicted? When someone no longer has a safe and comfortable and habitable place to live for their belongings, for their own comfort and their ability to get a sound sleep at night. The vicious cycle includes not having access to a job, not having access to a means to actually get back on your feet again, not having access to food security, and in the case of those who are working, who are families, who have children, lingering effects for the children who then grow up in this sort of in a situation where they don't have access to an ability to learn in an appropriate way. So there's so many lingering effects from not having access to a home and a comfortable and safe place to live. On the other hand, as outlined, if you do have a comfortable place to live, you do have a home, there's so many things that you can do from there. If you have a place to sleep, if you have a place to be, you have a place for your belongings, and you're close to transit, you're close to family and friends, you have a way to get to employment, that can set you up and your children up for a bright future. So I'm glad that we're drawing attention to this. There's a lot that the city can do. And there's a lot more that the city needs to do to ensure that when we say we're the most livable city, that we're truly the most livable city for everybody. We also need a whole lot of help from our regional and state and federal partners. We need them to truly be partners and to invest with real dollars if we're actually going to make a difference on this critical issue. We can't do it alone. So I implore our leaders at those levels of government to work with us and to actually put their money where their mouth is when it comes to this issue. I know that my partners here, City Council, and I will do everything that we can working with the Mayor's office as well. I know that Councilwoman Gross, this is an issue near and dear to her heart, and wanted to say a few words of thank you as well.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you. I'm Deb Gross with Pittsburgh City Council District 7. I just want to acknowledge and thank Councilwoman Strasburger for her leadership today on this proclamation, and acknowledge the work of so many of the speakers that you're going to see here who have been educating City Council members on this issue for years now. And we continue to try to pull apart piece by piece the obstacles and the problems in public policy and funding that are contributing to this housing shortage. It's really important that we fight for housing as a human right, because the market isn't working, right? Either in the places where we have substandard housing or in the places where we have luxury housing, and it isn't creating spaces that people can afford to live in. And so we're here to fight to provide housing for our residents. And as the Councilwoman said, we really need the support of the county, we need the support of the state, and we need the support of the federal government, where we have seen dramatic budget cutbacks over decades. And we're seeing the evidence now in the hardship that our residents are experiencing on a daily basis. So I just wanted to say thank you all, and happy to continue to work on this issue where we know that evictions have gone up dramatically, and we need to figure out what are the solutions that we can do as city government. Thank you for your work.
Good afternoon. My name is Celeste Scott, and I am the Housing Justice Organizer at Pittsburgh United. So I first want to say it's very hard for me to stand here as a Black woman in Pittsburgh in light of the Gender Equity Commission report and all of the things that have happened over the past couple of weeks. So I'm going to talk about housing, but I'm also going to talk about equity and also about what we should be doing to make the quality of life and the conditions for Black women in Pittsburgh better. So I work for Pittsburgh United, which is a coalition of environmental, community, faith, and labor organizations. And what I do is I convene a roundtable every 2 weeks, and we really pay attention to what's going on in housing in the city of Pittsburgh. And the people that sit at this table, or some of them are in the room, they're organizations, they're individuals, and we really care about impacted people in this housing crisis, and that they get resources, and that they are getting what they need to stop the harm in this housing crisis. So some of the tools that we have been working on this year to make sure that they are implemented and that they get to the people that need them the most have been the Housing Opportunity Fund, inclusionary zoning in Lawrenceville, and also working to see if we can get things like Just Cause passed, if we can get more power in the city to expand the home rule charter to do things like just cause eviction, rent control, source of income, and rental registry. I stand here as a person with lived experience, and I also want to say that lived experience matters. I have been evicted many, many times. And I also want to say that we cannot forget whose backs we stand on in this work. Many of my mentors are not here today, but I stand on their backs on the work that they have done. Ms. Lee will be speaking, and she has done much work at Federal American Properties where thousands of people were displaced from East Liberty. And we cannot forget and erase the people who have done this work. And so I don't want to speak very long, but I just want to say that with the Gender Equity Report, I've been working with organizations like New Voices Pittsburgh for years that have been saying those same statistics. And I want to say that now that we know what we know, what's the plan? How are we going to make it better for the conditions of Black women in Pittsburgh? And I also want to say that we cannot talk about Black women in Pittsburgh without raising up Black trans women and the very unfair conditions that they face in Pittsburgh as well. And so what I want to end with is I challenge us to action My life is about action and making sure that people do not face what I have faced in my life. So around the proclamation and zero eviction days and any campaign, there has to be action. We have to show up and do the work. And so that's what I challenge us to do. I challenge us to trust Black women. I challenge us to believe Black women. And I challenge us to do better in this city for Black women, because I'm a truth teller, so I'm just gonna tell the truth. Black women are tired. I'm standing here exhausted, as many Black women in all sectors of Pittsburgh have been facing in the past couple of weeks. We are tired. We are facing a lot of complex PTSD, and we need people to support us, to believe us, and to trust us. When we say something, we mean it. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Alethea Sims. I am the president of the Coalition of Organized Residents of East Liberty. I have, in the past 20 years, faced displacement as the high-rises in East Liberty were demolished. I faced an eviction, a wrongful eviction from Penn Plaza. What people are talking about, I have experienced. I know what it's like to be put out with nothing but the clothes on my back. I know what it's like not to know where I'm going to go, because there were no plans made for displaced residents. I was not aware of my rights as a renter. I did not feel the what do I want to say, empathy from officials. They may not have ever experienced this. They don't know the pain, the heartache. And I'm just a single Black woman. How many Black women with children have faced this same thing? I am so happy that zero evictions for March, zero eviction, I need a nap, people. Zero evictions for October. Maybe it should be a year-round thing.
Yes.
Maybe it should go past October into the next year, into March, into the next October. Because no one should have to face eviction just because a developer can get more money if they build something else on that property. This has happened too much in the city. There have been too many Black people displaced from the city at a rate of 3 a day. Yet this is one of America's most livable cities. Most livable for whom? Let's make it truly a livable city for everyone. Let's make it a city of opportunity for everyone. Let's make it a city where I don't have to go to sleep at night and wonder, am I still going to be able to afford my home tomorrow? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jerry Dickinson. I am a law professor at the University of Pittsburgh. I am a housing advocate. I'm a lawyer and a former Fulbright scholar conducting international human rights work in South Africa. And I also happen to be a candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives in the 18th Congressional District here in the city of Pittsburgh. But for the next 3 minutes, I have my law professor and lawyer hat on. I want to talk to you about this historic day with the zero evictions policy and also the Human Rights Proclamation. And I want to thank the City Council, Human Rights Commission, Human Rights coalitions who have been a part of this process. Look, millions of Americans cannot keep up with their rent. Millions of Americans can't save enough money to own a home. Millions of Americans are being gentrified and displaced out of their communities. They are being evicted from their homes. This is a housing crisis in the United States, but it's also a housing crisis all throughout the world. A decade ago, as a Fulbright scholar, I sat in the shanty towns and slums of Johannesburg, South Africa, advocating and assisting the poorest of the poor in the world to stay in their home, to fight and protect their rights as tenants and as human beings, because they have human rights. Alongside South African lawyers, we worked and used international laws and treaties that provided a right to housing. Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that everyone has a right to adequate housing. The International Covenant on Social, Economic, and Cultural Rights states that everyone has a right to a standard of living. Everyone has a right to housing, and we use those laws to enforce and to protect the poorest of the poor in South Africa. Now, those same laws, international laws, also help inform and influence policy here in the United States, even here in Pittsburgh. As a housing advocate, not long ago, I represented a single mother who at the time was pregnant. And the landlord, after belatedly finding out that she had violated her lease agreement 3 years earlier, attempted to evict her from her home. She was going to be on the street in the middle of the winter while pregnant. Okay? Of course, 95, 96, 97% of tenants here in Allegheny County and all throughout the United States are not represented. They don't have access to a lawyer. And we represented her. We allowed her to stay in her home and convinced the judge to take in discretion the situation, right? To know that eviction was going to cause homelessness, was going to cause her to be in a serious injustice, okay? This same problem of gentrification is happening all throughout the city of Pittsburgh. In places like the Hill District, in Homewood, in Lawrenceville, we are seeing residents being pushed out due to increased rent and increased costs of housing. This is unsustainable. Therefore, it's incumbent upon us to use international laws and human rights laws to influence and inform how we go about changing laws and policy for the betterment of the poor, the vulnerable, and the marginalized in this city. The Universal Periodic Review, which is going to be submitted very shortly in just a few days, thanks to Jackie and the coalition for putting this together, is going to go to the United Nations. It is going to inform the United Nations on the current state of affairs here in Pittsburgh. The eviction rates, poverty, lack of access to affordable housing. But this is an ongoing project with the UPR. We're going to continue to conduct these ongoing assessments to ensure that the city of Pittsburgh, the federal government, and the state governments are able to comply and also change laws and policies for the betterment of the people. By doing so, we might be able to influence the federal government to give more dollars for community land trusts in communities like Pittsburgh. We might convince local governments to enact just cause eviction policies, right? Or we might be able to convince other places to enact right to counsel so that everyone has access to a lawyer regardless of your income. With that being said, we've got a lot of work to do. And I ask you all to join the coalition, the city council, the commission in making this place a better place to live for everyone. Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Laura Weens. I'm the director of Pittsburghers for Public Transit. We are a grassroots transit rider and transit worker union. We advocate for public mass transit as a human right. We at PPT know that no work towards advancing equity can happen in a silo, that our work for transit is important largely because it is the necessary conduit to access all of our other human rights. We need to have robust and equitable mass transit, yes, but we also need healthy, affordable homes to shelter in near frequent transit, the air that we can breathe comfortably while waiting at the corner for a bus, quality healthcare that takes our insurance and can care for us when we do get sick. We need access to food that enriches us and good union jobs to sustain our families with and that we can take pride in. In our work at PPT, we strive to build strong connections between our work and that of racial justice, economic justice, environmental justice, health equity, food justice, because that we know that without being conscious of these intersections at all times, we can perpetuate the harm that we are trying to rectify. I want to recognize the leadership of Councilwoman Strasburger for introducing the proclamation on zero eviction days and reminding us all of the commitment that the city has signed on to by becoming the 5th human rights city in the U.S. Signing the Zero Evictions Day proclamation was a commitment, not an accomplishment. Just as being a human rights city is an aspiration and not an award. We need to hear and take guidance from what Black women have been saying in the city for generations, what New Voices has been saying, and which Pittsburgh's Inequality Across Gender and Race report reminded us of. That we are not yet there, and national recognition of our city continues to be for landing near the bottom of the list on most measures of racial inequality. Pittsburgh is far from being livable or from cherishing human rights for all. What is inspiring about the UN process of universal public review, periodic review, is the opportunity to identify concrete local policy solutions that are in line with best practices across the globe to bring us closer to our vision of valuing all people and their right to live with dignity. Today, I most celebrate the work of Black women leaders in the housing advocacy community who lift us up and help us live up to the best version that we can be of ourselves. Celeste Scott, Miss Renelle Guy, Crystal Jennings, Miss Lisa Gonzalez, Miss Mickey Mack, Miss Carol Hardiman, Miss Lee Sims, Miss Carmen Brown, Miss Sandra Cole, and countless others that have done the painstaking work of fighting for and winning important steps that the city has taken towards housing justice, the Opportunity Fund, Lawrenceville inclusionary zoning legislation, among others. I celebrate the council members that have advanced these efforts, laying out a goal of 0 evictions, aspiring to be a human rights city takes courage, and for that I thank you. But realizing these visions takes persistence and commitment, and I challenge all of us to carry some of that burden, which are disproportionately borne by these women, and for which all of us will share in the reward. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lindsay Powell, and I serve as the Assistant Chief of Staff to Mayor Peduto. Thank you so much to my friends and colleagues who are here to celebrate this proclamation today. I know everyone's been standing for a while, so my remarks will be brief. The lack of affordable housing sits at the basis of a slew of social problems, from homelessness, poverty, education inequalities, as well as disparities in healthcare. So understanding the eviction crisis and how it relates to the need for affordable housing across the country and in Pittsburgh is critical to addressing those social ills and reducing inequality. As my colleague spoke, evictions are not just minor events in one's life. They can be disruptive, devastating, and life-altering. From having to leave your community that you've known and loved your whole life, from being a student and being uprooted mid-semester, to having a legal eviction that will bar you, in many cases, from finding affordable, high-quality housing as you move forward. And I brought this paper up here today because I wanted to make sure I got this point correct. Today, most poor renting families spend at least half their income on housing costs, with 1 in 4 families spending over 70% of their income on just rent and utilities alone. 70% of their income on just rent and utilities alone. And while the cost of housing across the country has gone up in every single city, we know that wages have not. So any irregular paycheck, any emergency visit to the hospital could put you at the precipice of eviction. And we know that these numbers disproportionately affect low-income women, and especially poor women of color. And that evictions can be the cause and not the symptoms of those social ills, of poverty, of homelessness, of educational attainment, of poor health outcomes. And we know that, again, those same issues are disproportionately affecting poor women of color. The city of Pittsburgh is committed to equity, and we know that countless reports can tell us how much further we have to go. But a commitment to equity is a commitment to addressing evictions, the eviction crisis, and our massive need for affordable housing across the city. Under Mayor Peduto's administration, with leadership at the Urban Redevelopment Authority, City Council, community members, we've created the Housing Opportunity Fund, a $10 million a year fund to ensure that we can create more high-quality, affordable housing units for everyone. With community stakeholders, organizations, activists, we've made sure to fund programs that allow for income-restricted individuals and families to keep up with their rent, to buy their first homes, and to stay in those homes. And so this proclamation this morning upholds the Zero Eviction Days pledge, Pittsburgh, along with other cities, ensuring that we do the work to make sure that Pittsburghs can keep Pittsburgh home. Thank you so much.